Hello, 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 and welcome to the first episode of Mixed Media Reviews Season 4. Season 4? How is that even possible? That is so wild. If you didn't know, my name is Kelsey, and today I'll be talking about a book. This week's book is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. At least that's how I think it's pronounced. I had seen this book all over the internet. It was marketed as a cozy read, and I finally decided to give it a go. It came up on my Libby's Hold in December, at the end of the month, I believe, and I just decided to dive right into that audiobook. Today's episode shouldn't contain any spoilers outside of some character names and some general plot points that I'm sure you could probably guess. But be warned just in case you don't want to know anything about it, and I highly recommend reading the book. I'll just say, I guess that's a spoiler of the episode today, so go check it out if you have not already. Legends and Lattes is, the full title is Legends and Lattes, a novel of high fantasy and low stakes. After a lifetime of bounties and bloodshed, Viv is hanging up her sword for the last time. The battle-weary orc aims to start fresh, opening the first ever coffee shop in the city of Thune. But old and new rivals stand in the way of success, not to mention the fact that no one has the faintest idea what coffee actually is. If Viv wants to put the blade behind her and make her plans a reality, she won't be able to go it alone. But the true rewards of the uncharted path are the travelers you meet along the way. And whether drawn together by ancient magic, flaky pastry, or a freshly brewed cup, they may become partners, family, and something deeper than she ever could have dreamed. Right? Such a cute little blurb, little summary. Yeah, it's perfect. It's the perfect book. Okay, let's continue. So what did I like about this book? I think it's pretty obvious that I've already started gushing about it, so I pretty much loved all of it. This book was, simply put, it was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it, even though I'm recording this towards the end of January now, or mid-January, I guess. So it's been a little bit, and I still can't stop thinking about it. That's how good it was. It's written as a high fantasy, but instead of being about some, grand adventure with swords and travel and sorcery and prophecies, it's more about an orc opening up a coffee shop. I mean, there's still adventure, and there's swords, and even some sorcery, and kind of some prophecy a little bit. But it's in a cozy atmosphere. The stakes are still high, like the full name of the book implies, but maybe a bit more relatable than the unrelatable stakes in a fantasy novel, like literal lives on the line, perhaps. Much like a traditional high fantasy read, our main character is on a quest, and that quest still has problems along the way that she needs to fix. And of course, there's characters she has to find and pick up along the way. This is a slice of life type of story, but it's set within a fantasy world, and it's absolutely perfect. It's like the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. We still get all the telltale signs of being a science fiction novel, but they're a bit more intimate, if that's the right word, and that's exactly how Legends and Lattes feels. But instead of a sci-fi setting, we get a fantasy setting. Besides just being the absolute best, Baldree's writing was wonderful to listen to, but it's also got some really fabulous characters. Viv is our main character. She's an orc and a retired mercenary who basically discovered coffee on one of her adventures and never looked back. But I loved all the other characters as well, from Cal and Tandri to Pendry and all the other shop regulars. And especially Thimble. Thimble was so stinking cute. I loved him. It was such a rich tapestry of characters, not only with diverse stories and backgrounds, but the different types of fantastical creatures they were. Viv is an orc, Tandri a succubus, Cal a hob. Without having the story drag and lull by explaining all these things, Baldur's able to create a very rich and full world. One that felt real and solid, making Legends and Lattes feel more like it was just a small part of a much larger and established fantasy series than a debut novel and a standalone. I think what really resonated with me was that in the end there was still that kind of moral to the story that a lot of good fantasies possess. It still had its revelations, its kind of aha moments. It still had so many of those aspects you find and like in high fantasy, but with a much more fun and cozy setting. And that all culminates in that last bit of the book with, for lack of a better phrase, where they defeat the great evil and the spark of hope for a better and brighter future is present. It just toned down a bit. Baldry was also the narrator of the audiobooks, and he was great. It comes to no surprise that he is an audiobook narrator to start with. It does, however, come as a bit of a surprise that this is his first novel. I loved all of the voices he did, and I loved that he was fairly neutral for Viv. It really fit her character. It didn't make me want to speed up the book to get through it, like some other books I've read recently, or listened to, I should say, but it actually made me really excited to listen to more, which is really the best type of narrator, one that can pull you into the story instead of pulling you out. This was a fantastic, I keep saying the same things, but this was such a really good book. And not only does Baldry do a great job at narrating it, he of course did a fantastic job writing the novel as well. It was, I think, really well written. And again, I'm very surprised that it's a debut novel because it's just written so well. There are really no critiques. Maybe that's the only way it didn't live up to its, full high fantasy potential, is that it was a quick read, not a billion pages long, just a solitary book. But that's not really a critique, because I think a lot of fantasy novels have gotten way too long and are long because they're long-winded, not because there's just a lot happening. And Baldry is very much a quick and to the point kind of a writer, and it was perfect. The pacing was great, so it didn't feel like it was going way too fast, and it didn't feel like it was going way too slow either. Would I, in the future love to catch up with Viv and see her expanding her shop? Or maybe joining with a bookstore or some other equally exciting adventure? Of course. But I also really love the length that it was, and that it's a standalone with a little bit of a prequel. But that actually just came off my Libby's hold yesterday, so finally get to read it. And I'm really excited about it. So, yay. But I think I'd be okay if it didn't follow the high fantasy rules of 17 novels and 32 offshoots. So, yeah, really no critiques. I highly recommend reading this book, obviously, but especially if you're into fantasy, or even if you're actually into romance, or if you're not into either, or if you're into both. I think it really fits kind of all of the criteria. If you want to get into fantasy, but you're a bit nervous right now, now that, fantasy is a million pages long, like I said, and they're these epic sagas where they're all romantasy, I think this is a perfect way to dip your toe into the fantasy world. And I also think it's a great kind of a break or a breather from a lot of high fantasy. You can still get some of the feel of it, but it's not as intense or intimidating maybe. So I think it's just really good all around, whether you're into fantasy or not. And if you're into romance, there is a bit of romance, but I don't think it overpowers the plot. But it's not so little that I think people who really love romance will be wanting more. Well, I mean, we always want more, right? But I think it's a good amount. Legends and Lattes still has a bit of action. There's still a hint of romance, but I think it's a bit more digestible. Aren't you proud of me for making only one food drink pun? And it's at the very end of this episode? I didn't even shove a bunch in earlier. Anyway, I think this book is the best of both worlds, like I've said, and I highly recommend you check it out. Or if you did, good job. Tell me what you thought about it. And there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. Thank you so much for joining me. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr at Mixed Media Reviews Podcast. Please leave me a comment to let me know if you agreed, disagreed, have comments, or if you have any suggestions. You can also find me anywhere you find your podcasts, probably. Though using Spotify would be very helpful for me. Please join me next week where I'll be reviewing one of my favorite TV series to come out last year, School Spirits. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye!